Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Dana and this is Delighted to DIY. Starting with a pack of wood heart cutouts from Dollartree that I had from Valentine's Day, we are going to cut down the bottoms to a more rounded shape. I used my pencil to freehand where I wanted to make the cut and used my floral wire cutters to make the cuts. But I'm sure scissors would probably work also because the wood is quite thin. Do this for all 5 hearts. I took a small bit of 80 grit sandpaper from Dollartree to smooth out the bottoms where I made the cuts. With a sponge brush and acrylic paint from Dollarama in the color bright red, I painted the hearts, including the sides and backs. Now do as I say, not as I did. The red paint wasn't covering the words after my 3rd coat, so I finally decided to use white chalk paint on the word side of the hearts to get the words covered, then painted right over that. I can't say how many coats I did. I did more than I needed because I was trying to get the red paint to cover the words. If you don't mind the words showing through on the back, you can skip the step where I added chalk paint for coverage of the words. With the hearts completely covered in red paint and dry, I took a white paint marker that I got at Walmart to add the seeds. I put little vertical dashes all over the front of each heart to mimic the seeds on the strawberries. Once this was dry, I took a scrap piece of paper and used my fingers to rub along the top of the strawberry shape to give me the outline. With a pencil, I drew a template of the strawberry tops. I drew what I thought would look good, but you can always use a photo for reference. Then I cut out my template. With a green piece of cardstock from Michael's, I traced the strawberry top template I just created 5 times, then cut each one out. Using hot glue, I attached all the green tops to the wood strawberries. Then taking my pencil, I felt for the hole and pushed it through the green cardstock. If you can't feel the hole, you could always try pushing the pencil through from the back. Do this for all 5 strawberries. To make the beaded garland, I used wood beads that I got from Amazon. This was a multi-pack and I used the largest size. If I can find the exact size of the beads, I'll put it down in the description box below for you. Taking 20 of the beads, I painted them red. The way I did this, which seemed to work well, was by putting a generous amount of paint into a small disposable cup. Then I added a very small amount of water. I wanted the paint to be just a touch more liquidy. I stirred the paint and water around well to combine. I then dropped 1 bead at a time into the paint water mixture, swirled the cup, and used a wooden skewer stick to make sure the bead was fully covered. I picked up the bead with the skewer and placed it on a paper towel to dry. I did this with all the beads. Off camera, I repeated the same process except with white acrylic paint and 20 more beads. Today's video is part of an open collab playlist where we were challenged to create fruit-themed DIYs that reminded us of a picnic. The hosts of this fun collab are Savannah at Savvy Crafts with Savannah and Megan from the Crafty Quinn. Both these girls are super talented. Please head on over to check out their channels. I'll have both of them linked in the description box below, as well as today's playlist. Watch it to see what other awesome YouTubers have created for this challenge. After I removed all the beads from the skewers, I took some jute twine from Dollartree and wrapped the end with a piece of tape to make it easier to string the beads. I strung all the beads alternating colors. Using the jute ties that came in the package with the wood hearts, I strung each strawberry and tied a knot at the top of each one. I counted over 20 beads from an end and slipped the strawberry over those beads and into place. From that spot, I counted 10 beads to the left and 10 beads to the right and placed 2 more strawberries. Then placed the remaining 2 strawberries at the beginning and end of the beaded garland. Using a couple strands of a mop head from Dollarama, I tied on knots to help separate the garland and to add a bit more interest. I'm not overly thrilled with the addition of the mop head knots and would probably leave it off if I were to make something similar in the future. Let me know what you think of the mop strand knots in the comments below. Would you keep them, ditch them, use something else in their place? After trimming the ends above the knots on the hangers for the strawberries, you're ready to hang your garland. For this DIY, we're going to be making some cute little fabric strawberries that can be placed on shelves or in baskets or on a tiered tray. Using some scrap fabric from a friend, I put 2 pieces of red-colored cotton fabric together. With a pencil, I freehanded a strawberry shape on the fabric, then cut just outside the line to make my shape slightly larger. With my glue gun, I place a thin strip of hot glue around the edges of half of one piece of fabric, then lined up the second piece of fabric on top and pressed them together. I continued gluing on either side down to the bottom, leaving a small opening to add stuffing. In this case, I used tissue, but polyfill would work also. I just used my finger to stuff the strawberry, but if your hole is smaller, then the end of a pencil helps to push the stuffing in and into place. Using my hot glue gun, I carefully applied glue along one side of the opening, then matched up the sides and pressed them together. I continued doing this to close up the hole we left to add the stuffing. With a scrap of green fabric, I freely cut out a strawberry top shape, then glued this with hot glue to the top of the strawberry. I cut out a small stem and glued this to the top. Using jute twine from Dollartree, I made a simple bow. I did this by making 2 loops, then crossing them together and pulling 1 loop through, like you would tie your shoelaces. I trimmed the ends, then used a small dab of hot glue on the back of the bow to adhere it to the strawberry. And that's it. I used other scrap pieces of fabric to make some other strawberries to display. But if you didn't have any scrap fabric, you could always use felt from Dollar Tree or old clothing to make these. For this DIY, you're going to need 2 packages of foam dice. I got mine from Dollarama. Once the dice are out of the packaging, I used bare chalk paint that I was so lucky to find in the Oops section for only $3. It was literally a steal. Unfortunately, I can't give you an exact color as it was a mist tint, but it looks very white to me. I gave all sides of the dice 2 good coats with the chalk paint, letting them dry between coats. Off camera, I searched for free strawberry SVGs and found the one I'm going to use on freesvgdesigns.com. In Cricut Design Space, I resized the SVG to fit the dice and made them into stencils. After weeding away the excess vinyl, I used Aura tape from craftersvinylsupply.com to transfer the stencils to the dice. Using matte Mod Podge from Dollartree, I applied a thin coat with a makeup sponge, also from Dollartree, to seal the stencil before adding my paint to help prevent the paint from bleeding under the stencil. Using the same bright red acrylic paint from the first DIY, I covered the stencils using a makeup sponge and a pouncing motion. I applied 3 coats to achieve the redness I was looking for and allowed each coat to dry in between. I used hunter green acrylic paint from Dollarama and applied it in the same way to the stencil of the stem. Here's where this DIY took a turn for the worse, but I will continue to show you my process and make other suggestions so you don't have to go through what I went through, unless you're silly like me and like extra work. When I removed the stencils, I watched as the white chalk paint was being removed also. It was horrifying. After I finished sobbing, I grabbed the white chalk paint and began touching up along the letter edges and all around the letters where the paint was removed. I also took this time to touch up the inside of the letters with the red paint. This was a tedious process that I wouldn't want anyone else to suffer through. Instead of using vinyl to create stencils, I'd probably suggest making decals to stick to the fronts of the dice, using stickers from Dollar Tree, printing out the design and copying it onto the dice, using carbon paper, or just freehanding it. Using a heart pick from the Valentine's supplies I had in my stash from Dollar Tree, I pulled off the foam heart and cut it in half with a steak knife. Ignore the 2 halves of the hearts in the video as you'll only need one. With the bright red acrylic paint, I sponged on 2 coats to cover the shine from the glitter, but I like the texture as strawberries aren't smooth. Using the hunter green acrylic paint and a small paintbrush, one even smaller than I used would probably work better, but this was all I could find at the time, I painted on the green top. I added the seeds by drawing on small dashes with the white paint marker from Walmart. Using hot glue, I stuck it onto the front of the dice with the top of the stencil stem showing above it. With more of my Valentine stash, I used this 2.5-inch wired ribbon from Dollarama, I think, maybe Dollar Tree, and measured it around the 4 dice, then cut the piece off the roll. To keep the dice in place, I used hot glue to glue them together. Then, starting at the bottom, I used hot glue to glue the ribbon down. I folded under the shiny parts of the ribbon as I didn't want them showing, and continued to glue the ribbon down all around the dice. With 5/8-inch ribbon from my Valentine stash, I cut a length about 12 inches to make a bow. I made the bow in the same way as the first DIY, but you may be able to see a bit more clearly my process in this part. After fluffing and adjusting the bow, I used hot glue to glue it to the top of the dice. To finish this off, I trimmed the ends, then dovetailed them by folding the ends in half and making a small diagonal snip downward from the folded side to the tip where the ends meet. I hope you enjoyed these summer fruity picnic DIYs. You'll have to let me know your favorite in the comments. And of course, if you like these, it'd be awesome if you gave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to see more. See you in the next one. Bye.